So I'm sure by this time you've seen some differing opinions on Diablo 4, the whole open beta. Some people think it's absolute dog crap. Some people think it's absolutely amazing. It's reinventing video gaming as we know it. Well, I'm going to give you my full take now that I've played tons of hours, probably over 100 hours of the betas, and give you my opinion on all the different things from like open world, character, itemization, graphics, all that kind of good stuff. Now, I do want to say this is, of course, based off the beta. This is kind of like the beta review. This is not an end game review, okay? We all haven't played that yet. There was some closed access media beta stuff that some people did try. This is specifically ranking and talking about what we've seen from the betas. Now, first off, I'm going to jump into probably the most important fact as far as it comes to any review. And a lot of times, you don't necessarily hear this in people's opinion about Diablo 4 or whatever, and that is I had a ton of fun playing in these betas. Now, the way that I could really measure how much fun I had, I usually generally stream 2, 3, maybe 4 hours a day. When I was playing this open beta, I literally lost track of time. And at one point, it was like 5 or 6 hours into a stream. I didn't even realize it because I was just having a ton of fun trying to like learn the new things with the game, slaughtering monsters, hitting some of the dungeons, this and that, playing through the story. So it's a little bit harder to put your finger on exactly, what caused the fun, this and that. But what I do know is when I was clicking buttons and when I was slaying monsters, I was having a great time. So that's what I just want to really important to note that right off the bat. So any of the criticisms that come later, this thing, that thing, they really didn't overpower and completely ruin the fun of the game. A couple of things I think they absolutely did nail, kind of like the dark atmosphere. It's not all like bright, whimsical like Diablo Immortal, Diablo 3. Wow, it's not like that. They kind of captured the way that Diablo was actually intended to be, in my opinion, where Diablo 1, Diablo 2, real dark, real nasty. There was actually a point where you guys probably had done the quest where the guy is actually strung up and he's completely skinned. I was almost like, ugh, gosh, that's a bit gruesome there, bro. But that is really more along the lines of what Diablo always was. A super, like, kind of adult, kind of gruesome, dark type of game. So the actual look overall, I think they absolutely nailed. Along with that, the graphics, I mean, they're really darn good. With that whole top-down camera from behind type of view, you can't really fully appreciate the graphics. Some of the cutscenes and actual, like, in-game cutscenes where it actually zooms in on the character and you see different things, then you can kind of see the full graphics, but overall, it just really does look pretty darn good. And of course, like a lot of other people mentioned, I think the sound they absolutely nailed. A lot of that bludgeoning sound when you're hammering down with that barbarian, or just the background music, actually, I think is done very well. It does a good job of setting up the atmosphere when you're going around in the town. Kind of sounds sad and dreary, like, I don't know, like hell's taking over the earth type of thing. That's how everybody would be feeling. So the sound and just the way everything was put together with the graphics and sound really nailed. And I thought they actually did a really great job here too with the movement of the characters, the way the skills swap in and out from using one to the next one, the way that the attacks kind of felt very responsive when you hit the buttons, the attack goes off type of thing. So different things with those types of controls, I think they did a very good job with as well. So it's one of the things with things that they got right. There's actually like less to talk about because, hey, this is good. That's about all you really need to say. It's either it's good or it's not. Now we'll move into some that's kind of like good and bad, we'll say. The open world, I kind of put in that good or bad category. Now it's kind of neat having the big whole open world and it looks great and everything, but I kind of feel like it was a little bit vacant at times. Obviously, you're going to have mounts and you can fast travel and stuff like that. But for now, like as you're playing through the game, you got to run and run and run and run. And at times you're running for what seems like minutes without ever coming across a monster. And the place you need to get is way over there. And when you're running super slow early on. So this might be just a criticism that just right at the beginning of the game could be a problem. But there's just seems like there's so much running in this open world area before you discover the waypoints. And obviously we didn't have mounts. A little bit more density of monsters in the open world, I feel like anyways early on would be better. Another thing with the open world, I know you could see people kind of running around this whole that MMO aspect, but I didn't really feel a lot of times like it was really a big open world with a ton of other people that were playing in it with me. It seemed to me a lot, in my opinion, that the other people running around who were playing the game almost like they were just NPCs that were programmed just to run around randomly. Because you don't really interact with the other people. You might come across an instance where they're slaying the monsters to complete the task or whatever it is to get the reward, and you jump in and you're doing it too, but it's not like you're actually like working together and communicating or anything like that. It's pretty much just like I said, there's NPCs in the game with you, running around killing stuff along with you, almost like it's a solo playthrough game. And another thing with the MMO type of aspect, the whole world boss event, I'm not 100% sure in the actual game how they're going to determine when the world bosses are going to spawn, but if they're anything remotely the way that they are in the beta, where they're going to be at a particular time, or maybe it'll be a random time, it'll say a half hour from now, the world boss is going to spawn an hour from now, whatever, that is a mega negative in my opinion. We'll take, for instance, the beta. Let's say you know when it's going to spawn. Well, the problem is I have a birthday party to go to, and I'm not going to be home. Well, if you don't go to that world boss event, you're missing out on a ton of legendaries. And those legendaries in this game are all of the power for your character. We're going to get into that a little bit later, but almost all of the power from your actual character derives from getting those legendaries. So this is the whole FOMO aspect to the game. They're trying to FOMO you into playing when you don't want to play, fear of missing out. And that really is a huge turnoff for me. If it gets to a point where I have to try to avoid taking my daughter to the park, or I have to try to get these legendaries to make my character more powerful, that's a really easy choice in my opinion. Now, jumping past that MMO aspect that I'm kind of negative on, we're going to jump into the dungeons. The dungeons were pretty much fine. I know there's quite a bit of ruckus out there about them being repetitive. I mean, repetitive, you go into a game, you click some buttons, you go around, kill monsters. I don't know. It's all pretty repetitive anyways, and like a lot of people will say, well, you run Pindle 5,000 times in a row. That's pretty repetitive. In my opinion, I feel like repetitive isn't necessarily the best way to describe the issue with dungeons. In my opinion, it's like having to constantly backtrack is the problem. There's nothing I hate similar to the open world where you're running around not slaying monsters. Every time you slay a monster, you could get lucky and you could drop something. That's the excitement of killing a monster. It's like a scratch-off lotto ticket or pulling the handle on a slot machine. Every time you could win. Every time you kill a monster, you could win, and that's exciting. But when you're in a dungeon, you have to run out over here, pick up a book or something, and then run back to the middle or pick up a key, and then put that key back there. The whole time you're running back to the pedestal or back to the door to put the key in, that's all time that you're not slaying any monsters, which means there's no excitement. It's literally just boring. Or obviously, this is not the first time you've probably heard this, but yeah, if you miss one monster off in the corner somewhere, but in that particular dungeon, you have to kill 100% of the monsters. Oof, that is a disaster. So yeah, it's the main problem here, in my opinion, is not really the repetitiveness, but it's the dungeon tasks that they require you to do. So either changing up those tasks, maybe don't put it so the key is off to the left and the key is off to the right, but maybe it's more straight line-ish and you pick up the key along the way. Or instead of slaying 100% of the monsters, it's 90% of the monsters. And then you can go ahead and open the door to the dungeon boss or whatever. Those are some simple fixes, in my opinion, that would be way better. Now we'll jump on to the classes and we'll talk about the bear and the wolf in the room. The druid, super weak early on. We're not talking about end game after you get 50 legendaries and you get all the different gear to perfectly synergize together, essentially having a perfect set that requires you to go into those skills and then you all of a sudden slaughter. Or the barbarian also is pretty weak early on, except for later game. I could see the argument, like everybody has been saying, that late game with all the different weapons you can have, 4 separate weapons with all different legendaries, could be godly late game. In the early game, it is incredibly weak, the barb and druid. So this isn't the first time you've heard this. I'm not going to do a full tier list, but yeah, sorceress, necro are the most powerful before 25-ish. Rogue is right there close. Barb and druid, way, way, way under. And since I mentioned how you have to have all these legendaries to get more powerful, we'll talk about the items. I'm not really a huge fan of you deriving literally 100% of your power from your gear. Like a lot of this stuff, it's not my completely original opinion, but it's a great opinion. A lot of these legendary aspects, really, why isn't that stuff on the skill tree? Because the skills, after you get them, then you branch off into the bonuses. Then you would put a point into those bonuses that should help the skill out. But really, a lot of the stuff on the skill tree, you're putting 1 point into one of the skills, and it bumps the damage up from 57 to like 59. I mean, come on, what is that even doing? But when you get all of the power is when you get like 3 of these legendary aspects on the legendaries, then you absolutely start wrecking. That's why in this game we'll slide right into the next one that I think is a little bit of a negative, but the way the game is designed, it's not going to change. It literally has to be this way because it's an online multiplayer MMO, and that's the dynamic scaling. As you've heard, as you level up, you literally get like weaker because your skill points don't give you hardly any more damage, but the monsters get more life and they deal more damage. So unless you're getting better and better and better gear, if you don't get lucky and find what you need, you're getting weaker as you play through the game. But like I said, though, this is just a negative because I don't have a preference for MMO games. And with this being an MMO, you almost have to have this in place in order for all the different people of different levels to be able to play together. Also, this allows it so that you can play the same zones over and over again as you level up, and it's not the equivalent of playing like Act 1 in Diablo 2, and the monsters are way weaker than the monsters in Act 5. It's kind of like reusing content, essentially. So what do I think of the game overall? Because that's really, how much do you really weigh those negatives that I listed against what really is probably the most important? Did you enjoy the game? Because that's really most important. Like I said earlier, sometimes the things that you like, it's harder to put a finger on, like, hey, I'm playing the game and I enjoy it, but what are the reasons why you're enjoying it so much? It's a lot harder to put your finger on all the things that were good about it that you liked, but it's really easy to point out the things that you didn't like, right? So if I had to give this a ranking from 1 to 10, I would say I would put the game right about at maybe a 6.5, maybe a 7. Because overall, I really did have fun playing the game, but the general style of the game is not really right up my alley. So with that, I probably will have a great time playing through the game, coming back each season and playing through the game. But unless there's things endgame that I think I'm going to enjoy way more than I think I really am, I couldn't see myself like permanently switching over and playing this game all the time like I do Diablo 2. There were a few issues that I didn't really list because I assume they would literally have to be fixed before the game actually launches. That's things like the people getting dropped from games. That's obviously the long queues. Maybe on day one there would be, but I assume those would go away relatively quickly. Along with that, getting out of town, sometimes there would be an invisible barrier and you couldn't get out of town. That's got to be fixed before the game actually launches, right? And then there was certain individual quests that also had like invisible walls, so you couldn't get into the area. You had to exit, come back, and then the wall would be gone. Those type of things would have to be fixed for the game, I would imagine. So I didn't really include those as negatives here in this particular review. Now, I know not all of my concerns would be addressed because a lot of people might not even hold the same opinion I do. And if you don't, feel free to let me know down in the comments. But if just a few of these simple things that almost every single person can agree on got addressed, maybe bringing the Barb and the Druid up early game to closer to where the other one's at. Doesn't have to be perfect, but closer. Making the dungeons just a little bit better, less backtracking and just less annoying to do overall. And maybe possibly making the builds not 100% gear dependent. I could easily see with just some of those minor changes, the game probably getting up to even an 8 or maybe even an 8.5 in my opinion. So like I said, let me know your opinions down in the comment. Like button, subscribe, get the bell notification turned on before you go. Peace out and keep slaying.